But we begin with a dispute over garbage. A second country in Asia is now vowing to ship Canada's trash back. Malaysia says containers full of low-grade plastics from this country are sitting in their largest port. Officials there opened these containers to international media today. They are filled with plastic bags and household waste. Part of that trash was sent to Malaysia by a Canadian company, which labeled them as recyclables. Malaysian officials say the containers were shipped from at least 14 countries, including the United States, Japan, France, and the UK. They say the unwanted waste was sent under the pretext of recycling. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister said today she will speak with the Environment Minister about this situation. But Malaysian officials are angry. They're saying they're not a dumping ground and they're not going to get pushed around.
Malaysians, like any other developing countries, have a right to clean air, clean water, sustainable resources, and clean environment to live in, just like citizens of developed nations.
Some of you may be surprised by what we're hearing tonight. CBC News spoke with Canadians today to see what they think about this latest trash dispute. Here's what some told us.
Yeah, it's not surprising. Like, if people aren't expecting it to see if it actually is. If you're just taking all the blue bin contents and dumping it into some container, like, you never know what's going to show up.
It's not just Canada, though. If they're blaming Canada, I think everybody is pretty wasteful in the world.
Why are we sending our garbage somewhere else? We need to be stewards of that in our own country.
For too long, countries like Canada and the US and European countries have been relying on sending our waste and recycling to other countries to deal with where labor costs are lower. And really, I think that's just not fair. We should be dealing with the waste here and finding a way to recycle it.
So let's explore this further. My guest wrote an op-ed in the Globe and Mail on the reality of Canada's recycling system and how it can be improved. He's joining me now to break it all down for us, Vito Buonsante. He's the Plastics Program Manager for Environmental Defence Canada. Welcome to you.
Thanks for having me.
Let's begin with what's happening in Malaysia. I do believe that many Canadians will be surprised by what we just learned today. In a country that is as modern and as wealthy as Canada is, how is it that we are even able to send our plastic waste that's not contaminated, that is contaminated? How are we able to send that away?
Well, you may be surprised, but I'm not, in the sense that Canada has been shipping its waste overseas for a really long time. About 30% of Canadian waste gets shipped somewhere outside the country of its, especially plastic waste. And it's labeled sometimes for recycling, but we'll never know, does it really get recycled?
Well, do we have a sense of how much of it is actually contaminated?
Well, we know that a lot of it's contaminated because, like, we used to ship most of our waste to China, and not only Canada. This is true for most developing countries. And China stopped accepting contaminated waste last year. And since then, we've been trying to find, or waste managers have been trying to find, other places where to dump this waste that is contaminated, very difficult to recycle.
And that's why countries like Malaysia are now picking up that slack, since China says we're not taking it anymore. So talk to us a little bit about the realities of recycling in this country. In your op-ed, you say it's broken. Well,
yeah, I say it's broken because, first of all, what we know is that Canada recycles only 9% of all its plastic waste. That's a really low number if we think that recycle has been always sold to us as a solution to the overconsumption and to the overpackaging of the products that we buy every day. So basically, only one item out of 10 on average of what we put in our blue bin gets recycled. That's pretty bad. It means there's way too much plastic.
So you're saying 9%. The number I had seen most often was 11%, so that's even worse. And I gather a portion of that 9 or 11% is also contaminated. So not even all of that number is being properly recycled.
Yeah, contaminated really means just that it's the plastic is mixed with materials that don't make it recyclable, or it means that there's like some food scraps, or it's just dirty. Like, imagine like our cardboard pizza that coming, and there's a bit of oil that makes the cardboard not recycling anymore. So that would be a contaminated material. And
I gather that even if a little bit of that contamination is in your blue box, you've now contaminated the whole thing too. So in your op-ed, you say that a circular economy is the solution, and that's an expression I've I've read a lot today when I'm reading about how countries are grappling this. Well, what does it mean?
Yeah, I mean, a circular economy is a solution in the sense that we need to move from a linear economy. A linear economy is an economy where we extract the resources, make products, and then we throw them away. The idea of a circular economy is trying to keep those resources and those products as much as possible into the system, into the market. So it means reusing as much as possible, trying to reduce as much as possible the use of resources, and finally, when we cannot reuse anymore, recycle as much as possible. But for that, we need products that are actually recyclable.
We as consumers can do our bit with perhaps, buying some of those reusable containers that are now more frequently available, where you can go go to a store and buy your own shampoo and put it in your recyclable metal container, for example. But you also argue it needs to happen with the companies themselves. What responsibility should be on their shoulders?
Yeah, well, now what happens is that the companies make the products, they decide how to design them, and they make a shiny packaging, and they choose like all a mix of materials because like their concern is to sell it, right? They have no responsibility when it comes to what happens when it becomes waste. And so what I'm saying is that we're subsidizing, us taxpayers, we're paying the poor choices that this company makes. When they make a product that it's not recyclable, we're paying the cost of that disposal. What I'm saying is that they should start to pay fully the cost of our recycling system.
Or change their ways, change how they package. Why does a head of Boston Bib need to be surrounded in a plastic clamshell?
Exactly, like they need to get creative. Once they get responsible, and they should be responsible also for collecting and recovering the materials, I'm sure they will get creative and they will find ways to make products more recyclable and to make sure that they don't get dumped and they get actually recycled.
I guess it's up to the consumer to demand that as well, but also with the pressure from countries like Malaysia that we're seeing today, if these companies don't adopt some changes, if the consumers don't adopt some changes soon, what do you expect will happen?
Well, I expect that we'll be drowning in plastic. We know that by 2050, the quantity of plastics being produced will double. We know now that these countries are not accepting our plastic waste, and it means that this plastic waste will stay here. So if no changes are adopted, both from federal and provincial governments, those that are responsible for taking decisions, and the companies being really responsible and change their ways, we will be literally drowning in plastic.
That's a dire prediction. I appreciate your insights and your expertise on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Vito Buonsante is the Plastics Program Manager for Environmental Defence Canada. So what role do corporations play in this issue? What do companies need to do to ensure their products are more sustainable? Joining me for more on this, Dirk Matten. He is the Hewlett-Packard Chair in Corporate Social Responsibility at the Schulich School of Business. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
So first question to you. Malaysia found in that waste, as we just heard, plastic bags from Canadian grocery stores. So how big of a role do the corporations themselves play here?
I think the corporations initially produce the waste. They produce the packaging, which then ends up in the waste. So there is a corporate role, but there's also a role for the consumer, of course, who throw that away. But I think overall it is more a policy question. What do we do with recycling in this country? Canada in the G20 countries is not even on the top 20 list of recycling. We have a dismal recycling system. And thank you for inviting me as a business school professor from Canada's top business school in Toronto here, the Schulich School. For 25 years, we have a program now to marry saving the environment and doing successful business in recycling and doing this intelligently. There are so many opportunities, but for some reason, and these are mostly policy-related reasons, it has not happened. And I would love to embark on this.
So policy from whom? Who makes those policies then?
Mostly federal, but also provincial government. What do you do with the blue bin in which we do depose all our paper and waste and stuff like that? Who separates it? Where does it go? Do we really know? Is there transparency? does the municipal government have involved businesses? In other countries in the world, it's huge business. I was working 20 years ago in another country. Someone in the industry told me, waste recycling is the most profitable business next to cocaine dealing. There are huge opportunities. And unfortunately, in this beautiful country, we haven't seen business jumping in on this.
So we're seeing a lot of our recyclables, or as we just heard in David Common's piece, recyclables that are contaminated so they can't in fact do anything with them. We're seeing this shipped, we were sending them to China. China has now said no more, thank you very much, and that's now why we're seeing countries like Malaysia taking it on. You say there's actually a business opportunity here. Do you envision a future where Canada doesn't have to send our trash overseas?
That could be one thing. There are very high value opportunities of recycling and turning this type of trash into products which could be sold profitably. The other option, of course, would be, since recycling, separating waste takes in a lot of manual labor, to do this in countries like the Philippines and Malaysia, but then Canadian companies can't just sign a contract and ship it away and forget about it, but have to monitor what is going on the ground. If you separate, you clean, and you work up the waste in a way that it can be transformed into new products, there is a huge business opportunities for these countries. And the problem with Canadian companies is that they ship it away, sign some contracts to often almost, I would allege, corrupt businesses at the other end, and think we are fine.
We do know there is some illegal recycling happening in some of those countries, as you allude to. So question then, should the focus be not so much even on recycling, but on reducing? It is one of the R's we used to talk about.
That would be the holy grail, of course. And I think we are still a way ahead of doing these things, you know. There are efforts, and you have to give credit to Canada, to ban single-use water bottles from, on my campus where I work, they are banned, and a lot of other companies in Canada have done this. But at the end of the day, these are part of life. Packaging in an economy which is organized as we have organized it, we need to create a recycling industry. It can be a profitable industry. That has been my message for 25 years. You can do well for the planet and to do well for business. That's the challenge we really have to embrace.
It sounds ideal, and I appreciate you coming in with your insights today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Dirk Matten, he's the Hewlett-Packard Chair in Corporate Social Responsibility at the Schulich School of Business, one of the best in the country. Thanks for your time.